The late afternoon sun cast its golden net across the quiet suburb of Austin, Texas. Long shadows stretched like tired arms over manicured lawns, and the faint sound of cicadas hummed in the distance. At the very end of Maple Street stood a two-story house framed by a white picket fence. From the outside, it was the portrait of the American dream flower basket swaying gently under the porch, the scent of fresh-cut grass lingering in the air, and chalk drawings fading slowly on the driveway. Little ghosts of children's laughter left behind. But inside, the air carried a different weight, a silence that wasn't serene, but thick, stretched taut like an unspoken argument. The walls themselves seemed to whisper, holding secrets no passerby could ever guess. In the living room, Linda sat quietly on the sofa. At 65, she was dignified, her silver hair tied into a neat bun, the kind that revealed both her elegance and her discipline. Reading glasses rested on her nose as she knitted a tiny sweater with patient precision. Her hands, though lined with age, moved with steady rhythm, each stitch carrying decades of practice and care. To anyone else, she might have looked serene, a grandmother at peace in her twilight years. But her eyes betrayed the heaviness of someone who had loved deeply and lost just as deeply. The house was her anchor, her last tether to her late husband. Every photograph on the wall, every creak of the wooden floorboards, every dent in the kitchen table carried his memory. Letting go of this place would mean letting go of him. And that was something Linda's heart simply refused to do. On the carpet nearby, 10-year-old Emily spun in circles, her doll clutched tightly in her small hands. Her laughter rang like little silver bells, filling the heavy air with a brief spark of light. "Look, Grandma," she exclaimed, lifting the doll high into the air. "She's dancing." Linda's stern features softened into a smile, her heart tugged by the child's joy. "Beautiful, sweetheart. She must have learned that from you." For a fleeting moment, warmth spread through the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Then came the sound of the front door creaking open. Mark entered 35, tall and broad-shouldered, his shirt still dusted with grit from the construction site. He carried himself with the weariness of a man who worked hard but never complained. Dropping his tool belt to the floor, he loosened his boots, relief flickering across his face as Emily rushed toward him with the boundless energy of youth. "Daddy," she cried, leaping into his arms. He caught her effortlessly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "There's my superstar. How was your day? Grandma made soup, and she's knitting Daisy a new sweater." Emily grinned, holding up her doll. Mark's gaze softened as it shifted to his mother. "Always taking care of everyone." "Huh." Mom Linda lowered her eyes with modesty, her smile shy. "It keeps me busy." From the outside, they looked like a perfect portrait 3 generations under one roof, laughter filling the gaps between them. But beneath the smiles lay cracks invisible to strangers, because one person was missing. Sophia, Mark's wife, Emily's mother, the storm that lingered just beyond the door. At 32, Sophia was striking, ambitious, sharp, and the kind of beautiful that drew eyes the moment she entered a room. But her beauty was often eclipsed by the turbulence inside her. She worked long hours at a marketing firm, juggling clients and deadlines while quietly drowning in the pressure. At home, she often felt like a visitor in her own life. When she and Mark married, she dreamed of building something fresh, something theirs alone. But instead, they moved into Linda's house. At first, she was grateful a roof already secured, free childcare, warm meals, and Linda's steady presence. Yet over time, comfort turned to suffocation. Every folded shirt, every unsolicited opinion about Emily's homework, every correction in the kitchen was like a thread pulled loose, unraveling Sophia's sense of control. To her, this wasn't a home she shared. It was a museum of another woman's life, her husband's childhood, his father's legacy, and Linda's authority lingering in every corner. Mark noticed the tension but chose silence, convincing himself it would fade if ignored. He loved his mother too much to confront her, and he loved Sophia too much to push her away. But silence, like a seed planted deep, had only allowed resentment to grow roots. That night, as soup simmered in the kitchen and Emily carefully placed mismatched napkins on the table, the home looked picture perfect. Linda hummed softly, her knitting folded neatly beside her. And then the growl of an engine cut through the calm. Tires crunched against gravel. The front door swung open, not gently, but with force. Sophia had arrived. Her heels struck the hardwood floor with deliberate rhythm, her purse landing with a thud on the entry table. Her eyes swept the room, sharp, calculating, exhausted. When they met Linda's, there was no warmth, only a tension wound tight over years of unspoken resentment. Linda offered a tentative smile. "Welcome home." Sophia. "Dinner's almost ready, chicken soup." But Sophia's lips tightened, her voice cutting the room like ice. "We need to talk." The knitting needles slipped from Linda's lap. Emily froze mid-step, a plate trembling in her hands. Even the kettle seemed to hush, its faint hum becoming the only sound. The storm had entered the house. The words hung heavy in the air. "We need to talk." Sophia's voice still echoed through the room, slicing through the fragile piece that had been holding the family together. Emily, still clutching a plate in her tiny hands, looked from her mother to her grandmother, confusion clouding her innocent eyes. She sensed the weight in her mother's tone, though she could not yet name it. Linda set her knitting aside carefully, her smile brittle. She tried to sound calm, her voice softened by decades of learning how to soothe others. "Of course, dear. We can talk after dinner. You must be tired from work." But Sophia shook her head, her jaw tightening. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she stepped closer. "No, Linda. Not after dinner. Now." The sharpness in her tone made Emily flinch. Mark was still upstairs, the sound of running water faintly audible from the shower. For a moment, Linda wished he were here. Her son had always been the bridge between the two women. Yet part of her wondered if perhaps it was better this way. No mediator. Just truth. She turned to Emily, forcing her voice into a gentle melody. "Sweetheart, why don't you take Daisy upstairs and play for a while? Grandma and Mommy need to talk." Emily's lips parted in protest, worry flickering across her face. "But Grandma..." "It's all right," Linda whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her granddaughter's cheek. "Go on now." The girl hesitated, then obeyed. Her small footsteps padded up the stairs, each one echoing louder than it should have until the sound faded into silence. Now it was just the two of them. Sophia crossed her arms tightly across her chest. Her eyes, though rimmed with exhaustion, burned with a fierce light. She drew in a shaky breath. "I want the keys." "Linda." Linda blinked, caught off guard. "The keys you already have, all of them." Sophia interrupted, her voice cracking for a moment before regaining its edge. "Every copy. From now on. This house belongs to Mark and me. You're welcome here. Of course, but it has to be our home, not yours." The words landed like a slap. Linda felt the air catch in her lungs. She steadied herself against the counter, her fingers brushing the cool tile as if anchoring her. "Sophia, I've lived here for over 30 years. Your father-in-law and I bought this house together. It's where we raised Mark. It's all I have left of him." Sophia's laugh was brittle, almost hollow. "And that's the problem. Don't you see this house is full of your past? Every corner, every wall screams you. I wake up and feel like a guest in my own life. Even in the kitchen, in the bedroom. In Emily's room, I'm constantly reminded it's yours, not mine." Linda's brows furrowed, pain cutting deep lines into her face. "I never meant to make you feel unwelcome. But you do," Sophia snapped, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as they gestured wildly. "Every time you fold our laundry without asking. Every time you tell Emily what she should eat, how late she should stay up. It's like you're reminding me I'm not good enough. That I'll never be the kind of mother, the kind of wife you think I should be." Linda's lips parted, trembling. She had no script for this. Only truth. "That's not true. Sophia, I've never judged you. I've only tried to help." Sophia's breath hitched, but she stepped closer, her eyes blazing with years of bottled resentment. "You call it help. I call it control. And I can't do it anymore. I won't." Linda shook her head slowly, disbelief etched in every movement. "So this is what it comes down to. Keys you think taking them from me will fix this." Sophia's voice was sharp, brittle as glass, because the truth is, Linda, I don't feel like this is my home, not with you holding the keys. The room seemed to grow colder. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint drip of water in the sink, each sound grew unbearably loud in the silence that followed. Linda's chest rose and fell unevenly. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "You're not just asking for keys, Sophia. You're asking me to step aside, to surrender my place in this family." Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer. Her silence was more brutal than words. Upstairs, the sound of water running masked the tension, but it could not erase it. Downstairs, in the kitchen that once carried the smell of bread and laughter, two women now stood like adversaries on a battlefield, one clinging to memory, the other desperate for freedom. The clash had begun. Linda's words trembled in the air like fragile glass. "You're not just asking for keys, Sophia. You're asking me to step aside, to surrender my place in this family." The kitchen seemed to stop breathing. The only sound was the faint tick of the wall clock, each second stretching unbearably long. Sophia's chest rose and fell, her arms tightening across her body as though holding herself together. Her voice, though sharp, now carried a waver, years of swallowed pain surfacing all at once. "You don't understand. Linda, I wake up every morning feeling like a stranger in my own home. I can't breathe here. Every move I make, I feel your eyes on me, judging, correcting, reminding me I'm never enough. And no matter how hard I try, I'll never measure up to you." Linda's throat tightened. Her hand twitched at her side, aching to reach out, to soften the fire in Sophia's eyes. But the sting of her words froze her in place. "I never wanted you to measure up to me," Linda whispered. "I only wanted us to share this house, this family together." Together, Sophia's laugh was bitter, jagged. She stepped closer, her heels striking the tile like warning shots. "Together means with you still holding the reins, with you deciding what's right, what's best, what's allowed. I'm drowning. Linda, I am done being the outsider in my own life. I'm done being invisible in my own marriage, in my own motherhood, in this damn house." Her voice cracked at the end, eyes gleaming with hot tears. The words hung in the room like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Linda steadied herself against the counter, her knuckles white against the edge. Her voice was quiet, almost pleading. "Sophia, you're not losing a home. You're losing yourself to your anger. If you keep on like this, you'll lose us all." The words hit like a spark in a powder keg. Sophia's hands trembled at her sides, torn between despair and rage. Her face twisted anger, grief, fear colliding in a storm too heavy to contain. "Stop talking to me like I'm a child," she shouted, her voice raw. "Stop pretending you know what's best for me, for my daughter, for my husband. I can't take it anymore." And then, before her mind could stop her, her hand shot upward. Slap! The sound cracked through the kitchen, louder than the kettle beginning to shriek on the stove, louder than the pounding of their hearts. Linda staggered back, her glasses sliding from her face and clattering to the tile floor. A red mark blossomed across her cheek, burning with the sting of betrayal. Her eyes widened not only from the pain, but from the weight of what had just happened. The kettle screamed louder, its shrill cry filling the silence. And then a small gasp. At the top of the staircase, Emily stood frozen, clutching her doll to her chest. Her tiny body was rigid, her face pale with fear. "Mommy." Her voice quivered like the faintest thread. Sophia turned, breath ragged. The sight of her daughter's terrified eyes hit her harder than any blow could. Her hand, still tingling from the strike, dropped limp at her side. Her voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Oh God, what have I done?" Linda bent down slowly, her fingers shaking as she picked up her fallen glasses. She did not look at Sophia. She did not speak. She only adjusted the crooked frames back onto her face, her shoulders trembling under the weight of silence. Emily's tears spilled freely now, her sobs piercing through the heavy air. She clutched her doll tighter, her voice broken. "Please, don't fight." The sound of her cries filled every corner of the house, echoing off the walls like a haunting refrain. Sophia's chest heaved, her own tears finally spilling over. But the damage was done. In the space of a single heartbeat, the fragile balance of their home had shattered. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a battlefield, and as the kettle screamed on, relentless and merciless, the silence between the 3 generations of women screamed louder still. The house, the dream they had tried to preserve, was no longer whole. It was broken. The echo of the slap still lingered in the kitchen, sharp and unforgiving. When the front door creaked open again, Mark stepped inside, towel draped around his shoulders, his shirt only half buttoned after his shower upstairs. He was still rubbing his damp hair with one hand, expecting nothing more than the smell of dinner and the usual chatter of his daughter. Instead, he froze mid-step. The scene before him knocked the breath from his lungs. His mother stood near the counter, her cheek flushed with a vivid red mark, her glasses slightly askew. Her hands trembled as she tried to straighten them. But the tremor betrayed more than physical weakness, it betrayed heartbreak. Sophia stood rigid across from her, chest heaving, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. Her hand hung limply at her side, fingers curled as though she couldn't quite believe what they had done. And on the staircase, Emily. Her tiny shoulders shook as she clutched her doll, tears streaking down her cheeks. Her voice wavered in the silence. "Mommy, please stop." Mark's pulse roared in his ears. He dropped the towel without noticing, his voice low but threaded with panic. What the hell happened here? Neither woman answered. The kettle shrieked on the stove, a relentless scream filling the silence until Linda reached out with trembling fingers and turned it off. The sudden quiet that followed was worse. It pressed on their chests, heavy and suffocating. Mark's gaze darted between them. His eyes landed on the angry mark across his mother's face. His voice cracked, half disbelief, half fury. "Mom." Did she? Linda lowered her eyes, unable to speak. Sophia broke the silence, words tumbling out in ragged gasps. "Yes, I did it. But Mark, listen to me." Mark raised a hand, stopping her. His voice shook with rage. "You hit my mother." Sophia's tears spilled over. She reached for him. Desperate. "I lost control. Mark, I didn't mean to. She pushes me until I feel like I can't breathe. In this house, I was drowning." Her words were cut short by Emily's whimper. Mark turned to the staircase, scooping his daughter into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing. He held her tightly, whispering, "It's okay. Sweetheart, Daddy's here. Daddy's got you." But his own eyes burned with tears. Over Emily's head, his gaze locked onto Sophia. His voice was hoarse, torn between anguish and fury. "How could you, in front of our daughter, to my mother?" Sophia shook her head desperately. "Mark, I love you, but I feel invisible here, like she'll always come before me. I can't live like this anymore." Mark's jaw clenched, the weight of his daughter in his arms grounding him even as his heart fractured. He turned to Linda, who stood silently, her shoulders slumped as if preparing for exile. Her voice was faint, almost lost. "Mark, maybe it's better if I leave. This house has become a battlefield. I don't want to tear your family apart." Mark's throat tightened. "No, this is your home too. No one has the right to drive you out." Emily stirred in his arms, hiccuping between sobs. Mark kissed her damp hair, his heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. Then he looked back at the two women, the mother who had sacrificed everything for him, and the wife he had promised to protect. Both were broken. Both were crying. Both looked to him, silently begging him to choose. His chest heaved as the weight of the impossible pressed down on him. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, his world collapsing into this moment. He whispered almost to himself, his voice cracked and raw. "God, how do I keep us together?" The house was silent again. But not with peace. It was the silence of a family balanced on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from shattering completely. Dinner sat untouched on the dining table. The chicken soup had gone cold. The bread hardened into stale silence. The chandelier above flickered slightly, casting shadows across the room, as though the house itself was weighed down by grief. After the chaos, Linda retreated quietly to her room. Her steps were slow, each one heavier than the last. At the doorway she paused, placing a trembling hand on Mark's arm. Her voice was faint, fragile as paper. "Don't be too hard on her," she whispered. "She's hurting, even if she doesn't know how to show it. But Mark, if this breaks your marriage, then maybe I should go." Mark shook his head immediately, his throat tight with pain. "Mom, don't. You don't deserve this. This is your home. Please, don't talk like that." Linda gave him a weary smile, half love, half resignation, before disappearing into the dim glow of her room. Upstairs, Emily had cried herself to sleep. She still clutched her doll, her tiny fingers curled tightly around it as though afraid it might slip away like the safety of her world. Mark sat at the edge of her bed, brushing damp strands of hair from her tear-streaked face. He whispered softly, "Daddy's here. Angel. Everything will be okay. I promise." But even as he said it, his chest ached with the weight of a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. He lingered there long after her breathing grew steady, watching her chest rise and fall in the faint glow of her nightlight. Finally, he forced himself to stand. His steps down the hall felt heavier than bricks. A thin strip of light glowed beneath the master bedroom door. He hesitated, swallowing hard, then knocked softly. "Sophia, can I come in for a moment?" Silence. Then the faint click of the lock. Mark pushed the door open. Sophia sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, still wearing the clothes from earlier. Mascara stained her cheeks, her eyes swollen and red. She looked nothing like the fiery woman in the kitchen hours ago. Now she looked small, fragile, hollowed out by shame. Mark closed the door gently behind him, his voice low but edged with pain. "We need to talk." Sophia nodded, her lips trembling. "I know." He stepped closer, every muscle in his body tense. "You hit my mother." Sophia, in front of Emily. "Do you know what that did to her?" To me, Sophia buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry." "God, Mark, I didn't mean it. I just snapped. I feel like I'm suffocating in this house. Every day and every choice I make, it's like she's there, reminding me I'll never be enough." Mark sat across from her on the bed, his eyes heavy with anguish. "You think I don't see your struggle, I do. But she's not your enemy. She's my mother. The woman who worked herself raw to raise me when Dad died. She's the reason I am the man you married. You can't ask me to cut her out. That would be like cutting out part of myself." Sophia lifted her tear-stained face, desperation flickering in her eyes. "And what about me? I'm your wife. Mark, I need to feel like I matter. Like this is our life, not just hers with you." Mark's voice softened, but steel lay beneath it as he reached for her hands. "You do matter, Sophia. More than anyone. But this isn't a contest. You and Mom aren't rivals. We're supposed to be a family. If we don't figure this out, we'll destroy everything: our marriage, our home, even Emily." Sophia broke then, her body shaking as sobs poured out of her. She leaned into him, clinging as though he were her last anchor. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin against her hair, his own tears spilling silently. When her sobs finally eased, Mark whispered into the darkness, "Tomorrow morning, you need to talk to her. Not as enemies, not as intruders in each other's lives, but as family, because if we don't heal this now, these scars will never fade." Sophia nodded weakly, gripping him as though she feared letting go. The night pressed on, heavy and sleepless. Shadows stretched long across the room, and silence lingered. Yet somewhere deep in the darkness, a fragile thread of hope began to weave its way back into their broken home. Morning came slowly, draped in a sky the color of wet ash. Clouds pressed low, promising rain, as though the heavens themselves mirrored the heaviness inside the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the shutters carried with it the residue of last night's storm. In the kitchen, Linda moved with deliberate care. Her cheek still carried a faint red mark, though she had dabbed powder over it, hoping to hide the evidence of pain. She filled the kettle with water, her hands trembling slightly. Tea had always been her ritual, her anchor, but today, even the promise of warm steam could not chase away the ache lodged in her chest. The silence of the house was different now, no longer just tension, but something fractured. She could still see Emily's tear-stained face in her mind, still hear the slap echoing across the kitchen, still feel the weight of Sophia's words pressing against her ribs. The floor creaked behind her. Linda turned, startled. Sophia stood in the doorway. Her hair was unkempt, her face bare of makeup, her eyes swollen from a night without sleep. She wore one of Mark's old shirts, the sleeves dangling past her hands. There was no fire in her posture now, no armor of pride, only hesitation, only fragility. Linda's instinct was to brace herself, to expect more sharp words, but then she saw it, the shame in Sophia's face, the guilt shadowing her eyes. Sophia's voice cracked as she spoke, fragile and unsteady. "Linda, I'm sorry." The kettle began to hum softly, filling the silence between them. Sophia stepped into the room, her eyes glistening. I crossed a line. I hurt you. I hurt this family. And worst of all, I terrified my little girl. There's no excuse. I let my anger, my fear consume me, and I lashed out. Her breath hitched. She lowered her gaze to the floor, her voice trembling. I was so afraid of not being enough, afraid of losing Mark to you, afraid that Emily would love you more than she loves me. I thought, if I took control, even of something as small as the keys, maybe I could finally feel safe. But all I did was break everything. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the cold kitchen floor. Sobs tore through her chest as she covered her face with her hands. I don't deserve forgiveness. Not from you, not from Emily. But please, please don't hate me. At that moment, soft footsteps padded down the stairs. Emily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her doll cradled tightly in her arms. Her eyes were wide, filled with worry far too heavy for a child her age. "Mommy," she whispered. Sophia looked up, her heart splitting at the sight of her daughter's frightened face. She opened her arms. Emily rushed forward, climbing into her lap. Sophia held her tightly, rocking her as though to shield her from every storm. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered into Emily's hair. "Mommy made a mistake, a big one, but I promise no more hurting, ever." Emily tucked her face into her mother's neck, clutching her doll with one hand. Her small body began to relax, though her eyes still shimmered with tears. Linda's own eyes welled. She set the kettle aside and stepped closer, her voice unsteady but firm enough to carry weight. "Sophia, get up." Sophia obeyed slowly, still holding Emily against her chest. Linda reached out, her hand resting gently on Sophia's shoulder. Her lips trembled, but her eyes softened. "You are Mark's wife. You are Emily's mother. You are not my enemy." Sophia's tears spilled harder, her voice cracked, but barely audible. "Can you forgive me?" For a long moment, silence stretched, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock. Then Linda whispered, her voice breaking, "Yes, I forgive you." Sophia collapsed into Linda's embrace. Emily pressed between them. For the first time, the three of them clung together not as rivals, not as broken pieces, but as family bound by regret, by love, and by hope. In the doorway, unseen, Mark leaned against the frame. His chest rose with a shaky breath, relief flooding through him. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't lose them all. The healing had begun. The kitchen was quiet again, but no longer with the brittle stillness of anger. This silence felt fragile, like the hush that follows a storm, the air still heavy, the ground still wet, yet a faint promise of light lingering at the edges. Linda's arms wrapped around Sophia and Emily, the three of them holding one another in a fragile, tear-soaked embrace. Sophia's shoulders trembled with each sob, while Emily clung to her doll and buried her face against her mother's chest. The little girl's voice broke the silence, soft but piercing. "Please, no more fighting. I don't like it when we fight." The innocence of her words cut deeper than any accusation could. Both women pulled back slightly, just enough to see Emily's face. Her wide eyes shimmered with tears, her cheeks still damp. Linda stroked the child's hair gently. Her own voice trembled, but it carried a steady truth. "No more fighting." "Sweetheart, not again." Sophia nodded quickly, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. "Never again. I promise." At that moment, a sound came from the doorway. Mark stepped forward, his presence filling the room. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tense, but there was relief in the way his shoulders finally dropped. He had watched long enough, silently praying for this very moment. "I've been waiting for this," he said softly, his voice breaking. "All I've ever wanted was a family that could stand together." Sophia turned to him, shame flickering across her face. Her voice was quiet, laced with regret. "Mark, I hurt your mother. I hurt you. I don't know how to make it right." Mark walked closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. With his other hand, he reached for Linda's. His eyes shone with tears as he spoke. "You both mean everything to me. Mom, you gave me life. You carried me through the hardest years when Dad was gone. And Sophia, you're the woman I chose, the one I love, the mother of my child. I will not choose between you. I need you both." Tears welled in Linda's eyes. She squeezed his hand, her voice gentle. You don't have to choose. Mark, not anymore. Sophia swallowed hard, then turned to Linda. Her voice was unsteady, but sincerity glowed in her eyes. I want to try again, not as rivals, not as strangers sharing the same roof, but as family. If you'll let me. Linda's lips trembled. For the first time in years, her smile was not strained, it was soft, genuine, filled with warmth. I would like that very much. Emily looked between them, her small face lighting up as though the sun had finally broken through. She giggled, a sound pure and bright. Group hug, she declared. Mark laughed through his tears, scooping her up effortlessly. Linda and Sophia leaned in, their arms wrapping around one another until the four of them were tangled together in a messy, imperfect embrace. It wasn't polished. It wasn't easy, but it was real. For the first time in a long while, the house felt alive again. The crushing weight that had lingered in every corner seemed to lift, replaced by something fragile yet powerful, hope. Linda whispered into the circle, her voice steady despite the tears streaking her face. From this day forward, no more walls, only family. Sophia nodded against her shoulder. Only family, she repeated, her words soft but resolute. Mark closed his eyes, holding them all tighter. His chest rose with a deep, shaky breath, or as though he were inhaling life for the first time after drowning. Emily giggled again, squeezing her doll and whispering, "Now we're happy again." Her innocent joy filled the kitchen, spreading into every corner, every wall, every memory that had once felt fractured. The scars of the past were still there, etched into their hearts, etched into the red mark fading on Linda's cheek, but they had been mended with something stronger than pain, forgiveness. And forgiveness, they all realized in that moment, was the only true foundation a family could stand on. That evening, the house carried a silence unlike any before. It was no longer sharp and brittle, nor heavy with grief. Instead, it was soft, almost sacred, like the calm after a cleansing rain when the air still smells of earth and renewal. The dining table, abandoned the night before, now glowed beneath the chandelier's warm light. Steam rose gently from bowls of reheated soup, the bread freshly warmed in the oven. The family sat together, not in perfect harmony, but in something far more precious, willingness. Emily chattered happily between bites, her voice filling the room with a music they hadn't realized they missed. At one point, she proudly held up a crayon drawing she had made earlier. 4 stick figures stood under a giant red heart. Mommy, Daddy, Grandma, and herself. See? We're together again, she announced with a wide grin. Linda's eyes shimmered as she gazed at the picture. Sophia leaned over, kissing Emily's cheek. It's beautiful. Baby, we'll put it on the fridge. Mark watched them quietly, his heart swelling. For months, he had feared his family was slipping beyond repair. Yet here they were, tender, fragile, but leaning toward one another again. When the meal was nearly finished, Mark cleared his throat. His hand slipped into his pocket, his movements deliberate. He placed a small velvet box on the table. Sophia frowned slightly. "What's that?" Emily gasped. Candy Linda tilted her head, curiosity stirring. Mark smiled faintly, shaking his head. He opened the box. Inside lay a shiny new house key attached to a silver heart-shaped keychain. Sophia blinked, her lips parting in surprise. Linda raised a hand to her mouth, stunned into silence. Mark's voice was steady, though heavy with emotion. "This isn't just a key, it's a reminder. This home doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to all of us, Mom. Sophia, Emily, me. No one is locked out. No one is pushed aside. We are a family, and this key is the proof." He placed it gently in the center of the table. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the gesture filled the room more powerfully than words could. Sophia reached out first, her hand trembling as she lifted the key. She turned it slowly in her palm, the silver glint catching the light. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she looked at Linda. "I don't want this house to feel like mine against you anymore. I want it to be ours. I want you here." Linda, not as an intruder, not as someone holding the past over me, but as family. Linda's lips quivered, and a tear slid down her cheek. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Thank you." Emily clapped her hands with delight, her smile lighting the room. Now nobody fights. Right, because the key means love. Her innocence drew laughter from all three adults, the kind of laughter that loosened the last threads of tension in the air. Mark reached across the table, taking Sophia's hand in one and Linda's in the other. Their hands formed a circle around the little velvet box. Emily, giggling, placed her small fingers on top, completing the chain. For the first time in a long while, the family felt whole. The clock ticked softly in the background, but its rhythm no longer carried the dread of time running out. Instead, it beat like a steady heart alive, resilient, unbroken. On the table, beneath the warm glow of the chandelier, the new key rested, not just a tool for locks, but a symbol of trust, forgiveness, and unshakable love. The house still bore its scars, the memories of harsh words, of tears, of a slap that would never be forgotten. But now those scars were no longer signs of weakness. They were reminders of survival, of lessons learned, of love reclaimed. And as the family lingered together at the table eating, laughing, and holding on to one another, they knew the truth. The storms would come again. Life would test them. But they had chosen each other, and that choice, sealed with a simple silver key, was enough to keep them whole.